Are you looking for a tasty way to prepare a chicken breast that still leaves it nice and juicy? Well, I have the perfect solution for you here. This is my Parmesan Peppercorn Chicken Cutlet, as well as two sides that I'll show you along the way. But if you're not a fan of Parmesan peppercorn, or you just want to change it up one week, I will show you how, coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name's Roy. I am a home cook, an amateur baker, and I'm here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is one of mine. Actually, it's going to be a few of mine because I made these chicken cutlets the other night, and when I was saying I wasn't sure what I was going to make for the next video, Paul said, make those chicken cutlets. I think it was just because he wants that chicken again. But he really did enjoy it. And so I figured, since that's a relatively quick recipe, I'll just show you everything I'm making for dinner tonight. Now I'll have the recipe for the chicken on the blog. The other things I'm just throwing together, so there's not really a recipe, but I'm going to show you what I'm doing. And if you have any questions about it, you can just ask down in the comments, but it's going to be pretty basic. Now, as you saw from the thumbnail and the title, the main dish that I'm doing is Parmesan Peppercorn Chicken Cutlets. But you don't have to do Parmesan peppercorn. As it says on the thumbnail, don't let the name limit you. You can do any flavor you want. I am using a dressing. You can use any dressing you want. I'm actually using a regular dressing, not a diet dressing, and it's still not going to be too bad on the bites and points. But you can use anything that you want, a low bite, low point dressing. You can use like a GU sauce. You don't have to stick with what I'm doing here, but I am going to give you the calories and macros and points and bites for what I'm making here, the chicken, not the other things. I mean, I will tell you what they are, but I'm not going to put them up on the screen because this is the main dish. So let me quickly go over the ingredients for the chicken first. I have here, I put it in the recipe as 12 ounces, so that way it's a 6-ounce serving per person. You can bump that up or down however you like. I know 4 ounces is considered a serving, but I go a little bit more because chicken breast is 0 bites, 0 points for me, so I bulk up a little bit there. But this one is actually about 15 ounces, so it'll be about 7.5 ounces each, but I'm going by what I'm going to put in the recipe, which is 6 ounces. That way you can figure up or down where you would fall. But if you're doing bites and points, that's going to be 0. So I have the chicken breast. I have here 2 tablespoons of Parmesan peppercorn dressing. Now, as I said, I'm using a regular dressing. I'm using Ken's Steakhouse Parmesan and Peppercorn. This is the one that Paul really liked, and I was going to try doing something different, like my Skinny Girl Honey Dijon. But then I checked this, and it only comes out to 4 bites for the 2 tablespoons, and when I split it, it's only 2 bites. So I wasn't too concerned about using this. So you can get away with using regular dressings, and I'll show you how I'm going to bump it up a little bit. But before I go on with that, I do have to tell you, if you are using the Healthi app, always double check what the nutrition facts say on the bottle or box or can or whatever against what's in the app. When I scanned this, it came up as 3 bites. I'm on the Healthi Better Balance plan, which is the equivalent to the old WW Blue plan. This came up as 3. I thought that was really good, especially for, it's not low fat or a low bite or low point, low sugar or anything. So I double checked, and they had the calories wrong, they had something else wrong. So always double check it, then edit it. I did do a video on editing in the Healthi app when something comes up wrong, or if you want to measure it a different way. Say it says here tablespoons, but you want to measure it by grams. You can edit it in that app, and I do have a video tutorial on editing foods. I'll put a card up here. I'll also link that down in the description box if you are using the Healthi app. You may want to double check also if you're using WW, just to make sure that things are coming up correctly. But I always check because I found numerous things that were input incorrectly, or they were older values that have changed on the item itself and weren't updated in the app. So always double check that. But that's the dressing that I'm using. To supplement that, I'm using 1 tablespoon of non-fat Greek yogurt just to bulk it up a little bit without adding any bites or points. And I'm going to throw some pepper, cracked pepper in there just to enhance that peppercorn aspect. Also for the chicken, I have 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of onion powder, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. Now you can honestly use any seasonings you want. This is a completely adaptable recipe. It's not even really a recipe. I'm going to show you how I cook my chicken cutlets and keep them moist so they don't get dried out while they're cooking. So you can really play around with it. You can use any dressing, any sauce, any seasonings. It's whatever your preference is. So as I said, don't let the title of this video limit you. Now to go along with that, I am going to have some broccoli and carrots that I'm going to cook up over here. And I have some garlic here that I'm going to toss in, as well as some butter spray that I'm going to spritz everything with. I have my cooking spray that I'm going to spray both pans with. I also have here 2 russet potatoes that I'm going to cut up into wedges, and I am going to microwave them for like 3 minutes just to get them par cooked, which means to kind of like partially cook them before you do the main event. That way it helps them to make sure they're cooked through enough. Then I'm going to put them in the air fryer. But I will let you know how I could do it in the oven if you don't have an air fryer and you'd rather do it in the oven. And I have here 1 tablespoon of ranch dressing mix. Now that's another thing that was incorrect in the app. They had it measured for a serving of 1/2 teaspoon, which the container had it listed as a 1/4 teaspoon and 0 calories. So I finagled that. Even if I didn't finagle it, this would still come out to adding 0 to the potatoes. I do have here 382 grams of potato. That is divided by 2 for Paul and me. That would be 192 grams each, which comes out to 4 bites or 4 of the old blue points. So this is going to be a very low-cal dinner, even with potatoes. So don't think you can't have potatoes when you're on a weight loss journey. You most definitely can. So let me shuffle a few things around. I'm going to get started with the potatoes first, and then we will move on to the rest. All right, so I have a little plastic container here that I'm going to microwave these potatoes in. Let me move them off to the side. I'm just going to cut these into wedges, cut them through the middle, then cut them through the middle again, then cut them into quarters as evenly as I can. Okay, so the potatoes are cut into wedges. I'm just going to throw them into my little old takeout container here that I've had for quite some time. They're coming very useful, and just going to, just a little quick spray. I mean, there's already moisture in the potato, so you're not going to have to really worry too much about it. And I'm going to sprinkle about half of the ranch dressing mix on here, and I'm going to cover that, shake it up, and make sure when you're putting these in the microwave that you have an opening. I'm just going to put them in for 3 minutes, and then I will move them over to the air fryer. Okay, while those are in the air fryer, what I'm going to do is just cut up my broccoli florets into more bite-sized pieces. Some of them, if they're big like this, you can just break off the ends and break them down a little bit before you cut them. I usually get rid of a lot of the stem. We're not really stem people on broccoli. And I do have my pan over there on medium-high, because what I'm going to do is first put in the carrots and sear those a little bit, and then cover them up so that they can steam slightly once they start heating up. And then I'm going to add in the broccoli shortly after. These will take longer to cook, so that's why I tend to throw those in first. But I will be doing that in a moment. Now let me clean off my board and I'll move on to the chicken. Okay, my potatoes have come out. I'm going to take the lid off for a moment and let them sit there and let some of that steam release while I work on the chicken. At the end of the chicken, there's these often little thin pieces. I tend to get rid of those just because those tend to get very dry when you're cooking them, even if you cook them for a brief time. So I like to make this as uniform as possible. So to make these into cutlets, what I'm going to do is cut along the middle here, down the length, and try to be as even as possible. But what I try to do is put my fingers against the board at a certain level and hold the knife there. So I'm going at about the same angle as we go down. This end does tend to be a little thinner, so you just have to watch as you're going to make sure that you're not getting like a really wafer thin section by doing this. But what I'm going to do is just slice slowly back and forth and move from the thicker edge down to the narrow edge, trying to stay as consistent as possible with the level. And that's all there is to making cutlets. Now you will get some of this where it splits, because that was a section of the underside of the chicken. But when you're cooking it, you just push it together and it kind of seals in. So we have our chicken cutlets ready. We have our pan ready for the veggies. I have my potatoes ready to go into the air fryer. Let me shuffle a few things around. We're gonna get cooking. Okay, so for the potatoes, what I'm going to do is put them in the air fryer. I don't have to preheat my air fryer, but if you do, you preheat it to the highest setting, usually 400. Mine goes up to 390. And I'm gonna air fry them for 7 minutes. Then I'm gonna shake them around, make sure they're not sticking together, and then air fry them for another 7 minutes. Then I'm gonna check them, make sure that they're done, leave them in there until everything else is ready so they stay hot. Sometimes they will soften up a little bit in there, so I will give it another minute or two just before I'm serving them. Now, if you wanted to do them in the oven, what you do is preheat your oven to 400 degrees, spread them out on a baking sheet, sprayed with some cooking spray or laid out with parchment, and bake them for about 30 minutes or so, 25-30 minutes, until they're browned and crispy. But these are going in the air fryer. Then I'm going to show you how I'm going to do the veggies. Then we'll move on to the star of the show, our chicken. All right, so I shuffled my pans around to make sure you could see into the pan. And I'm going to start with the carrots, as I said. The pan has been sitting over medium-high heat so that it will be nice and hot for them to go in. A slight little sizzle there. And what we want to do is let them sit here on the heat. Don't touch them for about 3 minutes. We want to get a little bit of color on them. Then we're going to stir them around, let them sit for another couple of minutes, and then I'll cover them. But while these are sitting, what I'm going to do is take my salt, pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder and mix those all together. And then I'm just going to season my cutlets so that they are ready to go in. And you can reduce the salt down. As I said, you can change out the seasoning. You can use ranch. You can use whatever you enjoy using on your chicken breast. And when you season, you always want to go from up high, because that way it'll disperse over a greater area. If you go down like this, you're going to be getting little pockets of seasoning all over the place rather than having it totally covered like it is now. So you can see that it's very evenly distributed here, and that is what you want. You don't want little pockets of seasoning all over, because then when you go to eat it, you have some that are heavily seasoned, some that aren't very seasoned. So always season from up above. And we're gonna flip them and add the rest of our seasonings. And this is obviously to taste as well. So this is just what I'm using, and I might not even use this whole thing because they're pretty well coated. And I do have some left, and I will save that. Actually, I can use that on the veggies. This is gonna sit, let some of that seasoning soak in, and these carrots have just another minute or so, and then I'll stir them around. So you can see starting to get some color on the carrots, and that's what we want. Just try to get a lot of them turned so that we get some extra flavor, because that is called the Maillard reaction, where food browns and it enhances all of the flavors. It cooks those natural sugars and really enhances the flavor. Now you just want it to go brown, you don't want it to go black, because that's when it starts to turn bitter instead of nice and tasty and flavorful. All right, so this has been sitting here for another minute. Now what I'm going to do is put a lid on top, and we're gonna let that steam for about 5 minutes, because as I said, the carrots take much longer to cook. So I'm gonna let those sit for 5-6 minutes, and then we'll throw in the broccoli. Okay, I wanted to show you what the potatoes look like after the first 7 minutes here. And you can see that they're getting some browning, but they're still a little damp and still have a bit more cooking to go. But I just wanted to shuffle them around, make sure none of them are sticking very carefully, because this is hot. I'm going to throw them back in for another 7 to 8 minutes, depending on what they look like at 7. Then I'm going to sprinkle them with the rest of the ranch dressing mix so that they get the flavor sticking to them while they're still hot. So these are going in. This has another few minutes. I'll be back. Okay, these carrots, I'm gonna just throw in a little bit of water, about a tablespoon or so, just to help them steam in there. As you can see, I'm getting a lot of steam at the moment, but that'll help cook them a little bit faster, and it won't let them burn on the bottom if they sit for too long. But you should stir them throughout while these are cooking, just so they're not sitting in one place for too long. Okay, so now I'm going to push the carrots to the side here and add in the broccoli. And we're gonna do the same thing. Just let the broccoli sit here for about a minute or two to get some browning. Toss it a little bit. I'll throw a little water in there just to help it steam, and then cook it covered for about another 2 minutes. But what you could do, if you didn't want to use water, you could use chicken broth. You could also use, I've used salad dressings, like a low bite, low point salad dressing. So that's an option as well, if you want to give it some flavor that way. Okay, so the broccoli is getting some color here. I'm gonna flip those a little bit. And this is also how I do just broccoli. But you only have to do the broccoli for like 2 minutes like this, 2 minutes steaming, and then it will come out perfectly. But because I added the carrots, I have to do a longer cooking time on the carrots. All right, so what I'm going to do is throw in the rest of the water, just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a specific amount, just to get some steam going. I'm gonna let this sit here for about a minute or two. Then I'm gonna move this over to the other burner so I can move my chicken pan in. And I'm gonna reduce this to low so that it can just sit and slowly cook. Let those carrots tenderize a bit more and the broccoli soften. So just want to toss this all together, cover that up, and I'll give it just a minute, switch it over, put it on low, and we'll move on to the chicken. Okay, before I move this over, I am going to throw in the garlic, some of the seasoning that I didn't use for the chicken. I don't think I need it all. And toss that. And then spray on a bit of spray butter just to get us a buttery flavor. Toss that all around. And now move it over to the low burner over here. Move in my chicken pan. And now we're going to let this pan heat up over medium-high heat. You want it to get nice and hot in there. We're not going to keep it at a medium high, but we do want it to start off that way. And make sure you have a lid and some tongs. While I'm waiting, I will mix my yogurt in with the dressing. This is basically just to bulk up the dressing a little bit without adding more bites or points. And you won't really taste the yogurt. It'll be overridden by the Parmesan peppercorn. Again, if you're not using Parmesan peppercorn or a regular dressing, and you don't need to bulk it up, you don't need the Greek yogurt. You can just use whatever sauce or dressing you are using. If you were using a ranch, I would probably bulk it up if it was a regular ranch, but don't worry about it if it's not. As I said, this is so adaptable. You can make it any flavor you want, any barbecue sauce, any kind of dressing. You do you. So let me, there go the potatoes. Let me show you those. So the potatoes are done, and I'm going to sprinkle them with the rest of the ranch dressing mix. And you can see they're nice and brown. And when I toss this mix in, I'm gonna toss them around a little bit to coat them. Then I'm gonna throw this back into the air fryer so it will stay warm. I don't need to cook it any longer unless, as I said, it sits for too long, and then I will heat it up for another minute or two. But these are going back in the air fryer just to stay warm. Then we're moving on to our chicken. All right, so our pan is nice and hot. You can go over there. Now what we're going to do is add in our chicken breast, and it's still hot on medium high. And what I do is I put the thicker end of one facing one way and the thicker end of the other one facing the other way, so that the thicker ends of each are facing the thinner ends, if you know what I mean, if you can see what I'm talking about here. All right, so we're gonna let this cook on this side for about 2 minutes. Then I'm going to turn them, because sometimes the outer edges of the pan don't get as much heat, so I want to distribute the heat as evenly as I can. So in another minute, I'm going to flip them so that what's outside is then inside. Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes. The audio from here gets spotty, so I'm going to do a couple of voiceovers. Here I'm just turning the chicken so the outside is towards the inside of the pan, as I'd said. Now I'm going to cover the pan. What we're doing in effect is making a little oven, which is not only going to help it to cook through, it's going to help keep that moisture in there so it doesn't get dried out. So it's going to cook like this for about 3 minutes, and I'm going to turn this down to medium for the rest of the cook time, just so that it's not cooking too high of a heat for too long. I just wanted enough to get some nice color on there. And right now I can reduce it because it's still going to take a moment for the pan to cool down. So we're going to let that sit here for about another 3 minutes, and we'll move on. All right, so it's been 3 minutes. Now you can see it's starting to get white on this side, so it's really starting to cook through. What we're going to do is flip them, and look at that gorgeous color on that side. So we're going to cook them again here for about 5 minutes, covered. And actually at about 4 minutes is when I'm going to take off the cover, put on our dressing. So I will give this about 4 minutes, and I will do the same little trick where I spun the outside to the inside, just to make sure it's cooking evenly throughout. Okay, so 2 minutes has gone by. I'm going to rotate the outside to the inside. Close this again and give it 2 minutes before I put the sauce on. Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes. I'm going to take the lid off carefully because the lid has gotten hot, and I'm going to spoon on half of this dressing onto each piece of chicken and just spread that out a little bit, trying not to let too much of it go over the edge. You want it to stay on the chicken as much as possible. Now I'm going to cover this back up and turn off the heat, because now I want the residual heat to heat up the dressing. It was already at room temperature. It doesn't have to be, because it will heat through here. but it was already at room temperature, so I don't need to let it heat through too much. But it's just going to sit here for about a minute, and then we're done. So let me clean up a couple of things, and we'll go over those nutrition facts. Okay, so as I said, I won't really be showing you all the bites and points for everything. The bites and points for the carrots and broccoli are 0 because I sprayed a little spray butter, but not enough to count for anything. For the potatoes, I told you I weighed them out and got 192 grams per person, which would be 4 bites. Now for the chicken, this is going to be using the dressing that I use, which was a regular Parmesan peppercorn. So still only going to be 2 bites, 2 blue points, which is not bad. I was going to try to find a Parmesan peppercorn that was more point and bite friendly, but I couldn't find any. So I figured I'd use the regular, especially since the chicken is 0. My whole meal tonight is only going to be 6 bites or 6 blue points. So I think I can use some regular dressing every now and then. Now, if you're following calories, the calories for this are 263, again, using that dressing. And if you're following macros, the fat would be 9.4 grams. The carbs would be 2.3 grams. The fiber would be 0.2 grams. And the protein would be 40.3 grams. And again, exactly as I made it here. If you use a different sauce or dressing, obviously those things will change. But there you have it, some delicious Parmesan Peppercorn Chicken Cutlets. And I will have the recipe, even though it's really not a recipe, but I will have it written up on the blog, and I will link to that directly in the description box, as well as to the blog itself if you're looking for any of my recipes. And also down there, you'll find links to my Amazon storefront. If I've used anything here that you are interested in, it may be there if I could find it there. There's also my Built Bar rewards, my Fetch rewards, and my social media, both my Instagram and 2 Facebook groups that I am part of. So I'm going to get my chicken and everything plated up. So until next time, bye.